Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Pressler. I'm the principal at Maine East, and we're very happy that you're able to join us here tonight for this information forum for our parents and families, talking about our proposed plans for the start of the new school year. As we start, I've got some other colleagues here with me tonight. I'm going to be doing a lot of the talking. They're going to be monitoring. We sent a link out if you would check your email for parents for you to submit questions. Thank you to the many of you that have already done that. We have some great questions. A lot of you are thinking and wondering the same things. And there's an ability for you to do the same thing. So we've got quite a bit of information to share with you. And we'll have a little bit of time at the end of this session for some Q&A. So again, the way to submit those questions is through that Google form. The link we sent via an email mid to late afternoon today. So to start off, I'd like to make some introductions. Joining us here tonight is our associate principal for teaching and learning, Allison Guest, our associate principal for student and family services, Michael Wardick, our associate principal for student experiences, Joaquin Stevenson, our assistant principal for student supports, one of three, Mrs. Nellie Diaz, and we have two of our fantastic Maine East teachers with us tonight. Ms. Jenny Burko, who teaches mathematics, is one of our building instructional coaches, and Mrs. Sarah Georgievic, who is our director of orchestras and is also a building instructional coach. So I may be asking them for some assistance here as we ask some questions. There have been a lot of moving parts this summer, but we're going to go ahead and pull up the slides now and start to walk you through the program this evening. Okay, so tonight, the things we want to do, try to make it clear how we've arrived at the decisions that we've come to for our proposal to start this school year. I want to talk to you about the plans that we are making for student safety. We want to provide some insight for you into what the student experience is going to be like, because this school year, when our students do come back into the building, is going to be totally different than anything we've experienced before. And I'll elaborate on that in a little bit. We also want to give you this information and sort of help summarize, because ultimately all of you as parents are going to have a decision to make, and that's about whether your students are going to stay home and do school virtually 100%, or whether they're going to come back into the building as we are able to make that happen, so that some of their experience is still going to be in real time. And we've got a couple of things that we want to ask your help on moving forward now through the summer and through the coming year. So first of all, I want to give you a little bit some information, sort of the rules, if you will. Most of you probably are familiar with Governor Pritzker's plan for reopening. Phase one, when we were spread of the pandemic last spring, the flattening. Phase three, recovery. Right now, we're in phase four. Again, that's gatherings of no more than 50 people. We're seeing restaurants, things like that, reopening, some travel. However, we know that there's some flux in that based on where some areas there may be starting to see increased cases of COVID. And then ultimately, phase five is probably really dependent on a vaccine or something when we're sort of on top of this COVID pandemic. So our planning for phase four, the guidelines have been laid out not only on Governor Pritzker's plan, but then in more detailed information from the Illinois State Board of Education, otherwise known as ISB, Illinois State Board of Education, and Illinois Department of Public Health. So what we have been doing for many weeks now this summer, planning not only for where we are in phase four, but what happens if we have to pivot back to phase three, or hopefully not phase two. So it really is helping us to prepare to be in other phases throughout the year. And as always, we refer to our guidance from the Illinois State Board of Education. We will make these slides public. There's some hyperlinks there. So if you haven't seen that detailed document that was released in late June, 23rd of June, and it is very detailed in terms of what we are expected to do as schools in the state of Illinois. You may recall that back in May, Monday, May 18th, actually, our superintendent, Dr. Wallace, sent a communication out to our families, and he talked at that point, based on what we knew even in mid-May, what this coming school year was likely to look like. And there really are three options. One would be fully virtual. And when we talk about virtual, we all experienced that for the last quarter of the school year last spring. And I'm going to talk about virtual learning again this year. And I want to emphasize the point that our plans for virtual learning look pretty different than last spring's virtual was in terms of the expectations for students, grading, attendance, things like that. And I'll go into more detail later. But one option this year would be full virtual. The other that he referred to was blended, which is a mix of in-person instruction under pretty strict guidelines in terms of ensuring everybody's safety, along with some online. So again, the virtual is fully online. The blended is a combination of in-person and online. And then the other option, if we get a vaccine or some miracle occurs and COVID goes away, is that we can come back and do school the way we have done it fully. So those are really the three options that we're working with. We have gained in the last few weeks quite a bit of information. We sent parent surveys out, and I want to thank all of you. For those of you that filled out one of those surveys, we had just almost 3,700 parents fill out that survey here in District 207. About 20% of the people who responded were from Maine East. We've also surveyed our staff in terms of what are their concerns and what does it look like for them in terms of safety. So what do we need to do in terms of being able to do our jobs to educate and serve your children? We had 705 respondents, all of them District 207 staff members. And we also surveyed students just a couple of weeks ago, over 1,900 respondents, and about 30% of them were from Maine East. What we've heard from the parents is really very consistent. Parents want high quality instructional experiences for our students. They really want to see social contact for students, because we know that was so difficult for everybody last spring. They want structure in students' lives, just again, that routine. They want the opportunities for students to receive the support they need to be successful, what they need when they need it. Parents want access to extracurriculars and athletics. And families want to have some options based on their individual family needs in terms of any number of circumstances. So, really what we hear from parents is we want school the way that we have been used to providing a very high level of service for many years in our Maine high schools. That being said, as we have been putting together the proposal for this coming year with about 100 of our staff members working for several weeks, count hours and hours per week. And that was a large group, working committees, 5 of them, composed of teachers, administrators, support personnel in the district. We've had some parent input as well, but that's really about balance. And as we're talking about balance, we know what parents and students and staff members want. And we also know what we are required to do based on the guidelines from Illinois Department of Public Health and Illinois State Board, ISB. And we have to find a balance between those two things. We also know that sometimes these things are going to ebb and flow in our communities, and we have to be able to balance there as well. So there are going to be some trade-offs. There are trade-offs very certainly in what I'm going to share with you this evening. And there may be other trade-offs that we have to do depending on what happens with the pandemic, if it either we see a decline in cases or if we see an uptick in cases. So really, what I'm going to talk to you now is about safety, because that is the primary focus as we've been laying plans for the last several weeks. And our commitments to safety sort of come in three big categories. Social distancing. So again, that's limiting the number of students in a classroom so that we maintain safe social distance as much as possible. That means at least 6 feet if we can do it. Sometimes it may be a little bit less. That means there are about 12 or 15 students per average size classroom, which is about 600 square feet in the district. Talks about the use of PPE, the personal protective equipment. Our plans call for all students and all staff to wear masks at all times. There are a very limited number of exceptions that might occur for documented medical exemptions for students or staff, and those will be handled on a case-by-case basis. And then the third of the commitments is related to hygiene, making sure that we are doing everything we can through our routines. One of those being increased use of hand sanitizers. Anytime you walk into a classroom, you're going to sanitize, and before you leave the room, we're going to sanitize. The cleaning protocols, cleaning desks, everything that we can do during school hours, in between, and continuous sanitization of high touch and high traffic areas of the school, restrooms, that sort of thing. We talk about social distancing in class. So as we set up our classes, desks are going to be spread out, or in some instances, there may be same number of desks in a class, but we're only going to use a third or a half of them, which again allows us then to rotate the use of the desks so that we have a better chance to sanitize, again, to keep our students safe. I mentioned that social distancing means we're going to try to be 6 or more feet apart when that's possible. The arrangement of classrooms will largely be all desks facing the front of the classroom, and teachers are largely going to need to remain at the front as much as possible, again, to maintain that social distance. In terms of our use of personal protective equipment, PPE, all students and staff are going to be required to wear a mask in school at all times, because we know that protects people, particularly when all parties wear a mask. That really dramatically reduces the risk of transmission. At times, face shields may be worn, and probably along with a mask that can be taken up and down, along with social distancing. An example of face shields would be in any sort of a class where we're working with language acquisition. So for students that are getting supports as English language learners, or in world language classes, face shields might be an option, at least for the instructor, perhaps for the students. And we'll go into more detail as we get closer to the rollout of school. There are a few exceptions. The one is when somebody is actually eating and drinking during lunch, take the face shield off. But if you don't have something you're putting in your mouth, then you've got to put the shield back up. And again, with those exceptions, as I've noted, we're going to review them on a case-by-case basis. Then hygiene. As I mentioned, hand sanitizer will be available in all classrooms, instructional spaces. Students, we're going to build those routines in the first few days of school so that we're sanitizing when we enter and before we leave. Just an interesting factoid, we are predicting, based on the number of classrooms in the district, that we're going to use about 4 55-gallon drums of hand sanitizer every month in school as we're going through this. We'll also have extra disinfecting protocols for equipment in sort of the lab, the hands-on classes like science, career and technical education, and fine arts, things like that. And increased cleaning in bathrooms, classrooms, and high-touch areas. We'll be deploying more of our building services staff to the hours when students and teachers are in the building, again, to do that frequent cleaning to help ensure that people are safe. So the next thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is the student experience. So kind of if I were a student coming to school on the day that I'm here, this is what this would look like. So before I ever enter school, while I'm still at home, we're working on the technology, but there'll be a way for students and staff to self-certify. So most of us have now gone someplace where we've gotten the questions about if we have had a fever, if we have had a cough, if we've lost smell or taste, if we've traveled, if we've been around anybody, so on and so forth. So there's a protocol that's standard across our district. If you've been running a fever, you can then self-verify, self-certify. And if we have an instance when somebody shows and they haven't done that, then we'll have a discrete way for us to be able to check and to take a temperature and determine that it's okay for them to be in the building. We will be working with our students and with our staff to determine, based on where they're going in the building at the beginning of the day. We're probably going to assign entryways because we want to really minimize or cut down on the amount of distance anybody has to travel in the building. We want to be really efficient about that. When people come in the building for the first time in a few weeks, you're going to find that nearly every hallway in the building is going to be designated as a one-way only hallway, as a single direction, and the same thing with most of our staircases. Why? Because just like we orient our desks in classrooms so that everybody's facing the same direction, we know that if we are all moving the same direction in a hallway, we have greatly reduced that face-to-face encounter, which is a heightened possibility for contacting COVID. The other thing that I really want to stress is there really are no optional spaces. So for students who have been here at Maine East, you know that you may have had a study hall or something, and you might have had some ability to say, well, I think I'll go to the cafeteria, I'll go to study hall, I'll go to the library. We're not going to be able to do that this year, at least until we're in phase 5. So what that means is for the entire day, every student at East will have an assigned place to be. If you're in a class, that's great. When you leave a class, then there's going to be a place where you will have an assigned seat where you can do studies, whatever you need to do. But we will have assigned spaces. We're also not planning to use any hallway lockers. So again, students are going to carry things with them, and we will greatly minimize any kind of congregating in the hallways. Going to have people continuing to move and go efficiently from one space to the next. In terms of the classroom experiences, we know that we've got to maintain that social distancing, ideally 6 or more feet from the teacher to the students and between students. We know that our bathrooms are going to be supervised throughout the day. Be a limited number of students. We'll go into each restroom, and if we have to block out or basically mean that we don't use some of the toilets, some of the urinals, we'll do that. And we will be signing students in and out. The reason for that is when somebody contacts COVID, we're going to have to do some contact tracing. And the thing I want to emphasize about contact tracing is it's not only about who may be exposed and who may come down with COVID, but it's also about reassuring and ensuring who is safe, so that you know that there has been no exposure or very, very limited exposure, for peace of mind. So everything we're doing in terms of these assigned spaces is related to being able to contact trace in the instances where we may need to do that. Collaboration, that's been a major push for us in terms of cooperative learning, a lot of other things for many years here in District 207. And really our collaboration is going to have to be socially distanced, or again, even when we have students in classes, continuing to use Zoom and Google Meets for virtual meetings as they collaborate in order to maintain the social distance. And again, probably going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but masks on at all times. In terms of lunches, as I mentioned, the cafeteria is not a place that we're going to be able to go. So the plan is that students largely are going to be eating in class in the middle of the day. The plan now is that at the start of the day, people will be able to order food from Quest, our food service, by an app before school or at the very start of the day. And then that food will be prepared. So it'll be a somewhat limited menu probably, but food will be prepared and bagged, and there'll be a tag on it as my name, Mike Pressler, has my room location for the time that we've designated for lunch. And then we'll be working to deliver those lunches to classrooms. Obviously, as mentioned, students are going to be able to remove masks only while they're actively eating and drinking. And we're going to add some time onto that second block of the day, depending on whether it's an odd block day or an even block day. As we mentioned about self-directed spaces, there really aren't any. This is kind of the no slide. Cafeteria and the library are assigned spaces. So, we would need to be telling you that is where you go, and you will have not only the fact that you're assigned to the room, but a very specific chair, desk that you'll be going to. We'll not be using hall lockers. We're not going to use any locker rooms for PE classes. If a student doesn't have a class the first block of the day or the last block of the day, however that lays out, students are able to come late in order to be here for their first class that's going to meet, and they'll be able to leave early when they're not in class. Again, we want to, anytime we can, reduce the number of people in the building because fewer people means lower risk of contacting COVID or spreading the virus. We're working on options for additional services when students are in the building but not in class. And it's going to take us a little bit of time as all of us, everybody in the building, we're learning new routines. But again, we know students need support and we are here to support them. That's our job. We will do that. And I'm sure with every passing week that comes up, we're going to know more and more detail. We're going to be able to give greater detail. And when there are requests from students and parents, or we see a need to support students, we are going to be able to address those things and rise to the occasion. For any students that are receiving services from special education or as English language learners, there's very specific state guidance that we're going to prioritize in-person instruction based on the individual needs of those students. We know that for students with IEPs, there are related services that they receive. Those are going to be provided in person or in synchronous virtual time. So again, I'm going to be in a room socially distanced working with you whenever possible. And if not, then we may be working via, again, a Zoom or something like that, but it's going to be in real time so that we can interact with one another. So when we talk about synchronous, that means just like we're live streaming right now, I'm talking and you're hearing what I'm saying very nearly in real time. And at this point, there is no change in the timelines for the evaluations and annual reviews that are related to students receiving special education services. Next slide just gives you a general concept of what we're proposing for the schedule. So what you see here is, look across the top, you've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And you're going to notice on Monday, we've got a block of time, and we have not put times on specifically because I think we're going to need to be flexible, especially early in the year as we're learning brand new routines about just how to get to the building, how to stay safe, how to support each other. So there's some PLT, some planning time first thing on Monday. Then we have a virtual day. And this is a time for me, I want to be very, very specific. When we say virtual, again, I want to be clear that it's going to look different than it did in the spring when we had to leave school. So those virtual times have specific times. They're about 30 minutes long. Teachers will be checking in with their classes, all of the students in their classes assigned. That'll be a great time for some community building to set the stage for what's going to happen instructionally during the week. There are myriad uses for that time, but there will be a specific time and students will be expected to log in on their Chromebooks. We will take attendance and there will be instruction happening. So it's not like the Friday office hours were in the spring. It has much higher structure. Additionally, on those days when there are going to be not very many people in the building, this is a great day for us to be able to provide some support for student and family services, for counselors, our social workers, our psychologists. Could be a time if there's needing to be test makeup, something like that, for some enrichment. Again, I think we will find a lot of ways to utilize that for some face-to-face time where, again, there are many fewer numbers of students coming into the building, but we're able to really maximize our learning. I think we can do a lot with our integrated career services and all of those experiences we want for students, because we have to remember, school is not just about the academics those classes are taking. It's really about the social emotional support in the experience. And given the parameters we've got in terms of needing to ensure that physical and health safety, those Mondays are going to become really valuable to us, especially in trying to provide that heightened level of social emotional support for students along with career services. Now, when you notice then on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, you can see the blocks again are arranged 3, 1, and there's a place for lunch, 7 and 5. The reason for that is that about 25% of our students have got a lunch assigned 3A. If because of transportation you need to be in the building, that's great, you'll have an assigned space. If you don't need to be here 3A and that's your lunch period, then you wouldn't need to show up until time for first period. We will obviously give a schedule that has times on it, but we didn't want those to sort of confuse the issue right now in terms of the start and the end of the school day. But that gives you an idea. Now, when you say 3A and 3B, that means in every third period class, we're going to take a look at the group of students we call the roster, and we're going to divide them into 2 groups. Half of the students are going to be in the A group. Half of the students will be designated as B group. So this means on Tuesday, if I have that third period class and I'm in the A group, I'm going to come to school and I'm going to have class in the classroom with my teacher third period. If I'm a B group student, I'm also going to have class that day, but I'm going to be following along in the class virtually using my Chromebook. Then on Wednesday, we flip that. We go through again the odd period blocks, probably a continuation or a development of that first day's lesson, Tuesday's lesson. But now the B students come to school and they are in the building, in the classroom. The A students are at home and they're going to attend class virtually. So when we talk about like the A-B split, this is how it will work throughout the year. Thursday and Friday, we do the very same thing. For the even period blocks, again, ranged 4, 2, 8, and 6. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, don't feel bad. There's plenty of support. We'll explain the blocks and the schedules to you, but it gives you an idea. Roughly, we're planning the school day for students is going to start at about 8:20, about when it did last year, and it will end at approximately 3 or a few minutes after. Again, I think we have to be understanding, especially early in the year, we're going to need to be a little bit flexible on time. Passing periods are probably going to take us a little bit longer, especially while we're learning the routines because of the one-way hallways and stairs and things like that. It might be really easy to just go down the hallway there to my next class, but that's not the direction the hallway goes. So we're going to have to move around again to keep people safe and to keep them moving through the hallways. Updated instructional practices. So we have, even last spring, in May, and after we ended classes for students, while teachers were still involved in school, throughout the summer, we have been doing the most intensive professional development I have experienced in my 28 years in this district. As I've said before, this is not the same as the virtual learning was last spring. There's going to be more synchronous learning in the spring, meaning you're going to be logged in when you're not in the building, working along. You'll be able to collaborate with your classroom peers through Zoom, through a Google Meet. And we also know, last year, because of the guidance from the state, do no harm with grades, it's not the case now. We're starting new, and we take attendance every day that you're here, whether it's virtual or whether you're in the building, you're expected to be there on time. And we will be grading. Grades count, work counts. We'll be able to support you. You still have retakes and redos. But again, this is different than virtual. The school day is going to be very close, if not identical, to the traditional in-person school day that we've known before. And again, grades in every class count, attendance counts, and attendance is expected whether you're virtual or whether you're in person. Plans now, when we talk about the first 3 weeks of school, we still have the bell schedule, but we're doing some things just a little bit differently on the first 3 weeks of school. So that very first week that students planning to be back, originally August 17th, that Monday, was to have been the first day for freshmen. And we've revised all of this now. So if you had an old schedule, get rid of it. We'll be communicating this out as soon as we have formalized the proposal for this schedule for the coming year. But on that week of the 17th, our staff will be in the building. The only students that we're planning to have in the building will be our freshmen, and they'll be on an A-B schedule. So on Tuesday, the 18th, half of our freshman class will be in the building. That'll be the A group. And again, we will be communicating with you ahead of time which group you're in. So there'll be quite a lot of communication between now and the start of school to help you know where you're going to go when you get here. And then we're going to have a lot of help for you when you get here. On Tuesday, then the B group will come in, and we'll do the same thing again on Thursday and Friday. So in the morning when they come in, we're going to be a welcoming and an orientation for a group we call Link Crew, which is designed to help our freshmen hit the ground running, to sort of learn how to be as successful and to learn the Maine East Blue Demon way. You'll have a chance to meet all of your teachers during this week, and you'll begin learning the safety routines and protocols. We're also going to be putting a really strong emphasis for all students on the technology tools and skills that you need to have to be successful when you are virtual. Because certainly you're going to be virtual at least every other day, and there may be some point at which the entire school has to go back virtual again. Hopefully not, or if so, hopefully for a short time. But we are trying to get everybody coached up so that we can pivot between being in person and being virtual and still be successful and have learning occur. The second week, the week of August 24th, that Monday, the 24th, is seniors only. So we're going to have our seniors back in the building. That's going to be a day, again, when we're able to talk about our safety routines and protocols. You'll be able to meet your teachers. And we really want to focus with our seniors early this year, because we know we watched the class of 2020, and the year did not end the way we would want it to end for any of them that way. So if we, knowing now, what we've learned in the fall, we can work with our seniors to think about, all right, what can we do working together to make this year, your senior year, the very best it possibly can be. Maybe we do our prom and our senior breakfast a little bit differently. Traditionally, those are the things we do right at the end of the year. So, we're going to start to think our kids are incredibly smart and bright, and they've got great ideas. And we are going to be willing to meet them and work with them to see what we can do to make this year good as it possibly can be. Then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're back on the block days. We're doing AB days. Our freshmen are coming back for their second week. And now we have our sophomores and our juniors joining us in the building. Seniors will continue to engage virtually during that week. And again, on any given day, it's just half of the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, and so forth. The week of August 31st, that Monday, we believe will be a staff in-service day, because I think we are going to have a lot as teachers and every adult in the building, in terms of the things we've learned, things that we know we need to maybe revise, get better at, to tweak a little bit so it works better for all the students when they're here. And then starting that Tuesday, which is September 1st, all students will be in school for a split schedule, meaning AB groups on alternating days. So that is our plan for the first 3 weeks. Now, the reason why is we know that we really need for our students to be able to meet their staff in person as soon as they possibly can in the year before we have to go virtual, because we've got to build those relationships. You have to kind of know who somebody is, and that is not always really easy to do virtually. So we really want to maximize that face-to-face time while starting small so that we have the ability to get our routines down in terms of lunch, in terms of hallways, safety, sanitization, and then gradually adding more students so that we feel like we've got this as students are coming into the building. We all know that there's going to be some additional preparation for freshmen, obviously, where they're brand new to the building in high school, and also for the seniors, because it's a big year, and we've got a lot of planning and looking forward to do for life after graduation. And we know that we're going to have to take some extra time to establish these new routines, just the things we do every day to make sure that we're all safe. So we're starting with fewer students and ramping up so that we really get that right and knock it out of the park. Now, what happens when we get a positive case? And I'm not saying if, I'm saying when. It's going to happen. There's very clear guidance from Illinois State Board of Education, Illinois Department of Public Health. Anytime we have something like this, we collaborate very closely with IDPH, and they're going to guide us on our school status in terms of how we're going to communicate. The communication plans we're building right now so that it's not like we're starting from scratch when this happens. And again, we're following ISB and legal guidance about what we need to do if then, so that we ensure privacy for any individual that may have COVID. And we're also doing what we legally and ethically need to do to inform others in the building. So again, we will follow all legal guidelines, and we will follow this to the letter of the law. Contact tracing, I've mentioned this a time or two. We have staff members in all of our buildings that are doing various trainings, most of them through Johns Hopkins. It's a 6-hour online course, and we've got at least 2 staff members per building that have either completed or are completing the training. And we can implement this routine immediately if we need to. What that means is, when we go through and we find out that something happens, then we've got to go back and sort of figure out where the person who has tested positive as COVID has been, and who's been in contact, and what the distance was. So again, social distancing, maintaining that is super important all the time, and the use of PPE, the face masks, so on and so forth. So we have a couple of scenarios for you. So what happens when your child's teacher begins a semester in person, but gets sick or tests positive? Well, the teacher is out of school at least 10 days from the onset of sickness, and for 72 hours without any sort of fever or respiratory symptoms. We go through the contact tracing protocol, which means students and staff in close contact may also be required to quarantine for 14 days. So it doesn't shut down the entire school, doesn't necessarily shut down an entire classroom. It really comes down to those assigned seats, to the arrangement of the classroom, to where the teacher has been, to the use of the PPE. All of those things come into play when we determine who may need to quarantine. If a teacher goes out, the last thing is, some people are saying, well, what happens? Now I bring a sub in that I don't know. We'll have some in-building subs, but really in terms of that instruction, most likely, in most instances, the teacher is still, they're going to be at home, but they're able to teach. So that class will go virtual. So rather than trying to bring somebody in who may not know the content, we're going to continue to have the teacher teach the class. They're the expert, they know the content, they know the students. But it may be flipped where we've got some students in the school and we've got the teacher at home teaching virtually, and we have a staff member at the school who is monitoring the class, making sure that they're all safe. Some other possible scenarios. And if you can just kind of click all these up at one time, that would be great. Thank you. Your younger child is exposed to COVID-19 in elementary school. Or maybe you have been exposed, you as a parent, to COVID-19 at work. Or, we have an instance, this is actually kind of true to life. Student spontaneously goes out for ice cream after a church youth group had a meeting. Everybody practiced great, safe protocols. Students decided, hey, we're going to go for ice cream. And actually, we're talking about how great the retreat had been, so on and so forth, but they didn't have masks on and they were not socially distanced. And we find out that a member of that group had COVID. In that case, very likely your student is going to be required to quarantine for 14 days. And again, there are a lot of questions around this, and everybody can ask a specific question. And we have got staff that will make a determination on a case-by-case basis. We're ready to move very quickly and nimbly and to communicate. But we've thought about a lot of different possible scenarios on this. So decisions. We're going to need your input. You should, if all goes according to plan, which I believe it will, on Monday, the 20th, all of our parents are going to receive a survey. And we are anticipating that the date for the survey to close for them to be back by the 24th. So you're going to have Monday through Friday of next week for you to determine, give us a little bit of feedback, because this plan is not, it still is a proposal, but we've spent a lot of time and we've eliminated a lot of other things because they were not as strong as this plan in terms of keeping kids safe and allowing us to provide what we believe is still a high level of instruction. But there are some ways that we may tweak it. So the input we get from you is really, really important about basic conditions, school environment, so forth. You're also going to need to determine as a family whether your student is going to go fully virtual for the first semester, which means you will do everything from home. But again, it's that longer traditional school day. It's the synchronous meetings with students who are in class, but you have an option to go full virtual if, for any number of reasons, if you just don't feel like you want to send your student to school yet in person, if there are some existing medical conditions for your student or for a family member, those are family decisions. And we're going to need to know because that starts then another series of planning about what we need to support the students who are fully virtual, for the students, the number of students who are going to be here as we assign spaces, as we determine A and B groups, balancing class size. All of those things are contingent on the survey. So I cannot stress strongly enough how important that survey is. Support, we need your help. And that is simply put, please, 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 social distance and use your masks and PPP all the time. This isn't just something we do when we come into the building and we work through the building and we walk out and we throw our mask to the side and kind of hang out with everybody. This has to be happening at home during the weekends when we're outside of school to make sure that we're all safe in school. So again, we want your students and we want our staff, all of us, to be healthy and happy and here in school. So I've been talking a lot. I really appreciate your patience listening. And we've got a few minutes, maybe about 10 minutes for some questions and answers. So we're going to hear some of our panelists now kind of coming back in, and I may be able to answer. I may be asking them to join us as well. First question, please.
All right, Dr. Pressler. So we've got a question about, is there any consideration of waiving school fees this year due to the pandemic?
It is my understanding, again, I haven't verified, but I think families in District 63 may have received a notification today or sometime very recently about either a reduction or a waiver of fees. So I don't know because we're different districts. We have not discussed that, so it's something that I will bring back, and I encourage, we've got it as a question that you've submitted, so we're going to be building an FAQ from these things to be able to put back out. I can say that there are some, we have eliminated some of the fees based on materials that it's unlikely that we are going to need or use, certainly for the first semester and perhaps the whole year. The other thing that I would encourage people to know is a big chunk of that fee goes to pay for the Chromebook that your student owns at the end of their high school career. And that Chromebook is going to be integral to our work, whether we're fully virtual, blended, or in class. So, I'm thinking probably most of the fee will stay intact, but we'll certainly bring that back, talk about it, and address that in the FAQ.
All right,
what other questions came up?
Next question, yeah. If we have siblings at school, are we going to try to put them on the same days as the A and the B schedules?
That's a great question. I think we've got the ability, I can see reasons why you would want the siblings all on the same A/B schedule, or depending on, maybe childcare, some other sorts of things that need to happen at home, you might want them on alternating days. So we'll have a way, we know who our multi-student families are, and there'll be a way that we can reach out. Or if you get a schedule and that isn't working for you, then you get in touch with us. We're going to work with you to make this, going to make it work as well as it possibly can for all of our students and our families.
Next question. Will Maine East follow the same schedule as District as 63?
I can't answer that. I did have a conversation with Dr. Roberts today, and I know they're still in the planning phase. They've got a lot of different schedule options that they're considering. So I don't know that we can answer that question right now. And feel free, anybody else, if you have something, jump into, but go ahead, Allison, what do you have?
How is the transportation from school to school and from school going to work?
Kind of the same way it always has. PACE is going to be the way if for the students who need bus. At least that's our conversation right now. If something else develops, we'll let you know to the extent that we can try to do something that's a little more specialized or nimble. That's one of those things that if I have to answer you now, it's you provide your own transportation to or from, or we have PACE. And it's one of those many, many things that once we lock a schedule in and we know who's here virtually and who's coming, then we can start to address many, many, many other questions and logistics.
Okay. When will students be able to pick up materials?
Materials pickup, probably, we've had just a little bit of conversation. Again, this is another one of these things that once we finalize the schedule, we'll be communicating. But our thinking right now is there isn't a lot of material to pick up now, since it's so much of what we do is virtual or online texts. So I think the extent to which we can do that pickup coordinated with the students' first day back in the building, we're going to do, so it's not an additional trip in, an additional exposure in the hallways and things like that. But stay tuned. We'll have more information in the next week or two about that.
Okay, so what additional support will be provided for students who may need more mental health supports during this time?
Again, we know that students don't have classes absolutely every time. So if I know that it's I'm in the A group and I'm in school that day, yes, I've got an assigned place for that study hall or that non-class period, but we'll have the ability for students to be able to meet with their counselors, with their social workers, with their psychologists. That may be virtual. We're going to talk about how we use our space nimbly. So if we've got a big space, we can socially distance, they'll be able to meet in person. And I think we're going to have a lot of ability to tailor those supports on that Monday virtual day as well. So that's our plan right now. And we're going to know more as we get in. Again, we find out who's going to be all virtual, who's going to be here blended. And that's the best answer I can give you now. If there are specific things you're thinking, throw that in the questions because that's going to help us.
Okay, next question. Will there be instrument lockers?
Well, that begs a whole lot of other questions. So again, we're not 100% sure that we know exactly what a music class looks like. And it's a little bit different for an orchestra string player who can put a mask on and be able to do what they need to do just fine. If I play a wind instrument, I got to take my mask off, or if it's on, I got to blow real hard, and that's probably not going to work either. So, we have to figure out what that is. And for choirs, you can sing with a mask on, but that's going to present a whole nother host of challenges. As far as the lockers go, there'll be more information for you, but we know that we're going to have to talk about very specialized cleaning and sanitization and really deliberate. Like, I'm thinking of going back to like week 1 as a beginning instrumentalist, when you learn how to very carefully clean your instrument before you put it away. That's not the way our kids have been rolling in high school by the time they get some bad habits. So we're going to have to ingrain some new good habits there.
Okay. Can students go home for lunch or bring their own lunch?
They can bring their own lunch, but once somebody comes in, we want you to stay in the building until it's time to go. That means if you can come later, that's great. If you can leave earlier, that's great, but we don't want people to come in, leave, and come back again. So yes, you can absolutely bring your lunch with you, or we'll have the ability to order.
Okay. Can students attend virtual class if quarantined?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That was easy. That was an easy
Yeah,
one.
I know. Oh, and then we're wondering also about the Chrome Depot. Like if we have Chromebook issues, where right now I think for some students who still have them at home, like the only way they work is if they have then the Chromebook plugged in. So how will students be able to get that support?
That's, again, I think that's a good question for us. And I'm very confident that we can get that support when they're in the building. And if it's hampering them, we'll figure out a way for additional flexible hours, some way to get them into the building to Chrome Depot. The big thing is we just need for parents and families to be super proactive when something breaks or it isn't working or you need a hotspot. Boy, don't be bashful and ask us early and often, because if you're not connected, you're not going to be able to do school. And we've got the resources to help you be connected. I think we've got time maybe for one more question, and then we're going to need to log off to get ready for the next session.
Yeah, there's lots of questions that people posted on here. So I think, right, Dr. Pressler will be able to post maybe an FAQ document at some point, or embed these then within some more information that'll be sent out, correct?
Okay. And the other thing too is for all of our parents and families, if you need to contact me, you can send an email. I don't want to promise that I'm going to reply to every email, because that might not be really possible or feasible. But certainly we'll put an FAQ out as we're looking for sort of the big questions. There are a lot of other places where you're going to be able to get some additional answers or support in terms of our administrative team as our staff is coming back to work for the new year. Counselors will be on a few days early, and we'll be communicating all of that as well. But we'll do some more of these. If the YouTube Q&A sessions are helpful, I am very happy to do as many of these as are going to be helpful for all of you, so that we're going to do the very best we can with this school year until we get past this COVID-19 thing. So I want to thank you all very much for your very kind attention, and want you all to be safe, and look out for that survey that's going to come out on Monday, and fill that out as soon as you can. Encourage neighbors, anybody who didn't log in. We'd like to get 100% of our people responding, because we need to know from everybody what their plans are. So again, thanks. Have a great rest of your night and a good weekend when it gets here. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye-bye.